Hey, everybody. So good to see you all. So thanks so much for joining. Happy Saturday. Um, it's a treat to have a chance to be here with you again. So Eileen was just mentioning a little bit about the benefit of having these rhythms, like structure in your week, structure in your day. Um, for those of us who are working busy full-time jobs, we may feel we've got a little bit too much rhythm, a little bit too much structure in our days as well. But it's there are these. She also very kindly pointed out that it's Thanksgiving coming up for the U.S. And um, I think when I was young, I made some effort to like try to have some mental independence, and so I kind of like cut some of my association with like normal holidays and so forth. But even within the Buddhist training that I did, we'd have annual celebrations and weekly things, and so the rhythm is so important, right? In different aspects of our life, and rhythms that kind of remind us of things that are beneficial, like Thanksgiving reminding us of gratitude, and rhythms of things like this class remind us, oh yeah, meditate. Oh yeah, inner peace. I forgot. And these different rhythms, like our kids' birthdays and so forth. And then we can begin to design some of our own rhythms as well, and begin to take some leadership and responsibility in figuring out what rhythms are most helpful for us in our life. So the why don't we begin with a bit of meditation, which is basically bringing in this rhythm of deep peace during our day. We normally have, when we fall asleep, deep peace, but during the day while we're awake, we don't often get into that state, but it's so healing and so healthy for us to dip into some state of peace and focus on the rhythm of our breath. So we can begin just by finding a comfortable position for our bodies, and may help to stretch a little bit. We take a deep breath in and out, and just stretching and resetting inside our body. We take another deep breath in and out and invite ourselves to relax. And then a third breath, and just invite ourselves to think, what is important right now? And then we become aware of our surroundings, the space around us, the temperature, the feeling of sitting down. And the feeling of our body. And we just try to wake up to the feeling of our own body. It's always there. We may be not paying any attention to it. So we bring our attention to the feelings inside our body. And in particular, we notice as our breath swells in and out, changing the feelings in our body. With every breath we take, our body changes, the feelings in our body change a bit. How does that feel for us? What's going on inside? And then we can ask ourselves, what is important in our life? Where in our life do we want more strength, courage? Where in our life do we want more ability to be a leader and set the direction? And then we can think through the time we have reflecting together today peacefully. May this increase our strength to be a leader in the parts of our life that are most important to us. We can open our eyes and rise from our meditation. So on Tuesday, I spoke a good bit about just what a broad subject leadership is. Right, leadership just means influence. And within your household, within your circle of friends, within your workplace, within your neighborhood, we all have influence on each other all the time. But people who are perhaps more courageous or perhaps take more responsibility or have a personality that people like to look to and listen to and so forth, they have more influence than others. And so leadership training in leadership means cultivating or increasing our ability to have influence in the areas of our life that are important to us. And I think that there are some caricatures about leadership, like leaders are only like the heads of companies or the heads of political parties, or there's a particular personality or whatever. But I think that those caricatures are probably not helpful for the most part. It's more helpful to just think everybody, is leading. And if you're just in one household, then you can be a leader in that household, or not, But there's all of these different domains in our life, and there's also So there's not one kind of personality type that becomes a leader. There's um, one of my friends, this guy named Don Finn. He's one of my mentors. He spent a lot of time coaching CEOs. So I've spoken to thousands of CEOs around the world, and so he's. I asked him at one point, what are the distinguishing characteristics of those folks? And he's like, well, they're all very driven usually, but other than that, there's really almost nothing that really distinguishes them from others. Typically, they're a bit smart and driven, but they're just people. And he's like, that's the main thing that he realized over years, that they're just people like everybody else. And they've got fears and wishes and biases and things they're good at and things they're not so good at, and so forth, exactly like everybody else. And so for him, he found the situation of speaking to CEOs very daunting in the beginning. He was like, well, who am I to, be up in front of all these CEOs talking to them and so forth. But then when he realized and reminded himself deeply that they're all just people, he became much more relaxed and comfortable with that. And I remember hearing a story that also stuck in my mind. It was, I might have told it before, but it was a group of people who had gotten jobs working at Harvard University, right? This super prestigious university, right? And after 10 months working in the job, they had a social event, they had a party, and they went around the circle and they're like, okay, so what have you learned in the 10 months of working at Harvard? And one of them said, I've learned that there are stupid people everywhere. And so I found that really funny, right? That sometimes you just end up in a position, not because you're like incredibly smarter than everybody else, but just, maybe your parents bribed to get you in, or just circumstances aligned. So you found yourself in a position that looks like you're, the top. But basically, we're all more or less the same. The similarities between us all are vastly, vastly outweigh the differences. And I've used the example before of like a flock of penguins, right? If we were 6 penguins sitting on this call together, and you invited some person and said, well, which of these penguins is best, right? Like, I don't know. They're basically all the same, right? All these humans are more or less all the same, but we make all these fine distinctions, right? My wife shared a teaching that she'd heard recently. Like, if you walk around through the forest and you see all these trees, and some of them are short and some of them are misshapen, some of them have a lot of leaves, some of them have few leaves, some of them are huge. Like, which of those trees is most attractive? I don't know. I mean, they're all basically just trees, right? Which of them is best? Which is the best tree in the forest, right? Well, they're basically all just trees. But when it comes to humans, we have this really strong distinction. Okay, which one's most attractive, right? Which one's best? Which one's strongest? Which one's smartest? And there's very competitive minds that kind of come up. But these competitive minds are basically making these super fine distinctions. They're splitting hairs, right? They're basically taking all of these people that are more or less all of our brains weigh about the same amount, about a couple pounds. We have more or less the same capabilities, but we find these little fine distinctions and are always trying to pay a lot of attention to that. And so we strongly discriminate between ourselves and others. We think there's this huge difference. And it makes us competitive. And sometimes our competitiveness can be helpful. Sometimes it makes us better in certain ways. We work hard to try to be better in a certain area. It's probably most healthy when we're competing with ourselves to try to, beat our own record as opposed to other people. But you can compete with others, and it's not an unfriendly thing necessarily. You can have friendly competition, right? Like, you can have a competition still where you like the other person. And so when we talk about leadership, we all have this innate capacity to lead, because we all influence each other all the time, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not. We're influencing each other all the time. but especially, I mean, if I'm just going to go ahead and express my bias, which is that if you're investing time in this class, about how to be a kinder person, how to be a more peaceful person, you probably should have more influence in the world, right? Like if you're the kind of person who likes inner peace and kindness and wisdom, then I want you to have more influence in the world. So, in whatever sphere you're in, right, you should have more influence and more confidence, right? We don't need, you know, malice and greed and so forth to have any more influence than they have, and anxiety. Those three, malice, greed, and anxiety, they've got more than enough influence in society already. So when we think about how, how could we have more, how could we step into a role where we're more confident, or we're having more influence than we have today, or doing more, or having more courage than we have today? Sometimes it feels like we can't, because we're stuck being us. That's the main limitation that we feel. I think probably in most areas of our life, we're stuck being ourself. And we would love to be, bit better or different or whatever, except the problem is we're stuck because we're like this, right? And we have this mental picture of ourselves. And that mental picture of ourselves, it feels very, very fixed and very real. Like we are like this. And so we have certain characteristics. We're good at this, we're not good at that, we're shy. I tend to very strongly think of myself as like a timid introvert and so forth. But nevertheless, look, I'm giving all these talks, and I'm, very confident in many areas of my life, but there's still this like mental picture of myself, like this timid, introverted person. So it's these pictures that we have of ourselves are not necessarily serving us. And so it's really helpful. The wisdom part of leadership is learning how to drop your sense of who you are, and to begin to get a picture of, to begin to adopt a different persona that is still in line with your natural tendencies, but is maybe what you'd call a step change. Like we tend to think we can only make incremental, tiny improvements, but we can, even with our personality, we can make what you'd call a step change, like dropping our previous sense of ourselves and really becoming somebody different. One way to think about this is, I know a number of you have children, right? So how do your children see you? I think maybe all of you have children. So how do your children see you? Right? And think back to how you saw your parents, right? Now you kind of know some stuff about your parents and what they're good at, what they're not good at. But when I was a child, I saw my parents as like godlike figures, this sort of like, big, powerful, mysterious. There's always some sort of aura of around them. I had a fortunate upbringing. My parents were kind, and so I always felt a sense of, safety, relaxation, comfort with them. Not everyone has that good fortune, but you think about that difference between how you saw your parents when you were a child versus how their friends saw them, or how you would see them now, or how their coworkers saw them, right? And you can begin to see we have in the totally different pictures of who a person is, right? Depending on the situation, depending on who's observing and so forth, we see people in very different ways. And people, in fact, are very different. We're a very different person when we're with our kids, when we're a very different person when we're with our friends. And our personality really shifts much more than we realize, I would say. It's much more flexible than we realize. And one of the best proofs of this, in my mind, is people playing video games. that when people are playing video games, well, you know how people can get into the video game and like they just lose track of time and space, and they become that little character, right? They become somebody else, utterly different. It's the same if we're reading books or watching movies. Our mind can get transported to a different world. We can forget about this world and we can live in that other world. So at that time, we totally identify with that character. The reason I mention video games is because it's active. It's something that people are doing. Whereas when you're reading a book, it's a little bit a step removed. It's somebody else's character. But even with that sense of I, like you can become a different person. Like I am Super Mario, right? At that time. And like running around, I got another point. They killed me. It's probably not the world's most addictive game, but when you're in that space, you get drawn into it, right? And so to my mind, that's proof that our sense of identity can change dramatically, but that it is just our normal belief, our fixed views about who we are that kind of lock us in to being a certain kind of person. So the meditation that goes along with this is, there's a lot of meditations that go along with this, but one of them is just thinking about what happens when we fall asleep and dream of being a different person, right? At that point, you can dream of being, you can dream of being a different gender, you can dream of being in a different place, different job, totally different, circumstances. Our identity can change completely when we fall asleep. And why? Just because we forget our normal sense of who we are. And at that time, we identify completely with our dream self, that person that we were, that we are in our dreams. And so knowing this, we can use that to our advantage to think, I can actually become a different person. And this is where sometimes one thing that can be helpful are these affirmations, right? Like I'd shown you those index cards that I use sometimes to like write down ideas. Some of them are like ideas about myself, right? Like I am like this, I am like that. So those kinds of affirmations, it sounds a little cliche just because they've been around for a number of decades, but it's very powerful, right? Like I am a confident person, right? I am a strong person. I am a kind person. I am an attentive husband, or I am, whatever are this version of yourself that you want to become, expressing that in words is powerful because it creates a vision. And that's what a dream is. It's just a vision, right? Where your normal vision drops away and you enter a dream, and that's a new vision, it's a new world. That's what a video game is. It's a vision of a new world. Like you're a new world, new person doing new things. So even in this life, you can drop your normal sense of who you are and develop a different, an affirmation. Now, I'm not saying that, I think there are ways to do that wrong, like never acknowledging any faults. Like if your affirmation says, I am a perfect person and I never screw up, that's probably not a wise affirmation because it may tend to make you blind to your own faults. Whereas an affirmation like, I take delight in recognizing my own faults and overcoming them, is actually it's a much stronger affirmation. Like instead of I'm a person who has no faults, think I'm a person who delights in the challenge of overcoming my limitations, right? And in that sense, our sense of identity can help us to move through these challenges. So developing a new identity. And I guess the only briefly, last point that I wanted to mention, because it's been on my mind a bunch over the last couple of years or so is about posture, like just the way we stand and the way we sit. And from the time I was a little kid, right, your parents and teachers say sit up straight and so forth, and then when I was a meditator, they say, oh, sit with the back straight. So I always thought that I had really good posture, but it's something that I keep working on, and it's interesting. The reason I keep working on it is because gravity continues to um, to I continue to be influenced by gravity. Speaking of being influenced, right? We continue to have mass, we continue to have gravity, right? Our head has weight, and generally we'll tend to go like this. Our shoulders have weight. Our inner organs have weight. And that's interesting, right? Like your heart, your lungs, your intestines, your liver, and so forth, they're actually fairly heavy. If you were to have to pick up, this is, sorry if this is grossing you out, but if you were to have to pick up all of your inner organs, that'd actually be quite heavy. And what's interesting is that we actually sag a bit under the weight of our inner organs. And so, how men traditionally have their bellies sticking out a little bit. Some of that is because there's a lot of weight in those intestines, and they sort of they want to go down, and to go down they have to spread out, and that's just what they do. And so it takes a lot of strength to actually carry your body. And so if you look at a dancer, like a ballet dancer, they've got beautiful posture, right? And if you look at a lot of athletes, they've got really good posture, really strong posture, these really athletic people. Now, we may think they have that strong posture because they do all this weightlifting and so forth, but to do weightlifting, you have to stand with a really good posture. Otherwise, you'll hurt yourself. And so in a sense, when people are training in sports and so forth, a lot of that training is actually training in posture. And at least for myself, my visualization is actually, I think about not just my head upright, but I think about all my inner organs, my heart, literally lifting up my heart, pulling all my inner organs kind of up and a little bit back towards my spine, like recognizing that when we were, evolutionarily, when we were quadrupeds on all fours, all of our organs were just hanging off of the spine, right? The spine still carries all of the weight for our body. So this is a kind of posture they teach in yoga class, right? Where you bring your belly in and all of your inner organs sort of up and back towards the spine. So you're really carrying them. And there's really this sense that you're lifting them up. And whenever I do that, it always feels to me like a regal posture. And I almost feel pretentious if I try to walk or stand with that posture, because I'm like, who am I to be standing with a regal posture? I'm some nobody, right? But in a sense, it's important. It shows that you've got the strength to carry your own weight. And if you're going to be a leader, you need the strength not only to carry your own weight, but to carry the weight of others around you, right? So if you can't carry your own weight, how can you carry the weight of others around you, right? So that's at least what I think about in terms of posture, and that and so because there's this interplay between our body and our mind. When I change my posture, it actually changes my feeling state. I actually feel a bit more like confident. The same way that, if we're ashamed, we're like, if we're in a tough meeting and we're, there's this tendency to cower with our posture. And so just intentionally holding your posture with great confidence is a way of changing your mind by changing your body. So you change your mind, you can change your body. You change your body, you can change your mind. The two play back and forth between each other. So just some thoughts. Any questions or thoughts on any of this, on leadership, the way we change our identity and so forth?
Yeah, I have a question, if I may. Is leadership somehow against being humble?
That's a great question. Is leadership against being humble? there always feels in my mind that there is some fear, and some tension. Like I've tried to be humble by following orders, um, and so I've really, I feel like I've put a lot of energy into training in humility, and I think it's a beautiful practice. And so there can be a conflict between humility and leadership. And training in humility is really powerful and a worthwhile practice also. But these days, my personal focus is emphasizing more leadership, but I try to keep humility at the same time by thinking, I am who I am because of my teachers, because of my parents, because of all of the good influences. And if I don't have the courage to speak up for all of the good influences that I've received, for all of the beautiful things that I think are valuable, then I'm not really honoring my teachers, and I'm not really honoring my parents, and I'm not really honoring human society. So when I train, for myself, when I try to build my confidence and train, I try to do it with a mind of deep humility. Like, this is a way of showing respect for my teachers. This is a way of showing respect for my parents. This is a way of showing respect for society. Um, and that's how I try to blend the two. But you're right that there can be a conflict between them. That's, at least that's my initial thought on that. But they're not absolutely contradictory. Like, you can try to do both at the same time. And the interesting thing is that if you really, I mean, some of, if it's leadership in the sense of like thought leadership and ideas and so forth, if you really have a lot of humility and respect towards teachers that you admire or subjects that you admire and so forth, that gives you confidence, because you're like, no, they're right. Nobody else is, can contradict that. And so you can have humility and confidence at the same time. All right, so why don't we take a little bit of time in meditation, and I'm going to go through a meditation that's a little bit like playing with that sense of identity and going back to this area in our life that we wish we had more capabilities to lead and influence. And then, if you have time and a wish, we can have more questions and discussion later. Okay, so let's meditate on this topic. And what we're going to do is meditate going back to that area in your life that you want to have more influence and confidence in. We're going to reimagine ourselves in that way. So begin again by finding a comfortable position, breathing in and out, resetting ourselves and inviting ourselves to relax. And so we can bring to mind this area in our life that we want to have more leadership or influence, more courage and strength. And then we can ask ourselves, how is it that we see ourselves in a way that holds us back? Is there a way that we see ourselves, think about ourselves, that makes it feel very difficult for us to accomplish being the leader we want to be? How is it that we see ourselves in a limiting way? And then we can think just like when we fall asleep, we forget our normal self, and when we dream, we become a different person. Other people can see us in radically different ways. We are a different person at different times. The person that we think we are right now, this limited person, that person doesn't exist. It's just an idea that we have. And so we take that limited view of ourselves and we just think, are there ways for me to prove that that person doesn't exist? Am I always like that? Do I have to be like that? Is it just my perception? Is that the way others see me? And we can just invite ourselves to drop that limited sense of ourself. Just imagine that person goes away. And we can try to feel as if we woke up from a bad dream. We just imagine this limited self just disappears like a bad dream. How would we be able to approach these challenging situations in our life if we were not that limited person that we normally identify with? What would be like? What would we want to be like instead? And try to imagine a new version of yourself that's more capable. And then we can conclude just by reflecting on how grateful we are for all of the people and circumstances that have helped us to get where we are today, our many teachers, parents, people who've helped us, our families, friends, co-workers. We can take some time to give thanks, to feel some gratitude in our hearts. We can make a decision to serve these people, to honor these people by being stronger and more confident in the areas of our life where we have the greatest opportunity to help. It's the best way of giving back to our parents, friends, teachers, family, increasing our capacity to help. And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. So thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody in America for whom that's coming up. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm super grateful for this group for giving me a chance to share all of these things that have meant so much to me over a long time.